After the funeral of my father, a prominent shareholder who had just been laid to rest, my brother-in-law took everyone by surprise by initiating a conversation about inheritance. The focus of the discussion revolved around stocks and a substantial $5 million inheritance, boldly asserting that it was destined for my wife, the eldest daughter, and my sister. This revelation initially filled her with joy at the prospect of a windfall. Unfortunately, their excitement was short-lived as the lawyer delivered the unfortunate news that my brother-in-law had no legal claim to the inheritance. I am Greg Johnson, a 42-year-old office worker, and my family consists of my wife and 2 children. Reflecting on my father's life, despite being 78 years old, he remained vibrant and actively engaged in his work. My older sister, a perpetual source of trouble, led a carefree life without a job, causing constant worry for our parents. In the middle of her middle age, she introduced Aaron Corner, a young and handsome man, announcing her intention to marry. Despite his youth and good looks, I couldn't warm up to him due to his demeanor. Swiftly, my sister demanded that our father foot the bill for her wedding, quickly squandering the money and unapologetically asking for more. A year after her marriage, tragedy struck when my father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. Devastated by his sudden death, I found myself overwhelmed with grief. As usual, my sister offered no help, leaving my mother and me to handle the funeral preparations. After the funeral, a lawyer visited our home to discuss the inheritance outlined in my father's will. While my mother and I were already aware of its contents, my sister and brother-in-law were oblivious until then. Their shocking claim asserted that the stocks and $5 million inheritance should go to my wife, the eldest daughter. Stunned and speechless, my mother and I were taken aback. The lawyer, however, corrected them, revealing that my brother-in-law had no right to inherit. Surprised and disappointed, my sister and her husband expressed disbelief and shock. The lawyer dropped another bombshell. My sister and I did not share the same father. This revelation left my sister furious, demanding an explanation from our mother, who wore an indescribable expression. The long-held family secret had finally come to light, leaving my sister shaken and seeking answers. "I'm sorry," our mother managed to say amidst the shaking emotions. "You are the child of my previous husband. Since childhood, my sister had teased me, claiming that Dad loved her more. Faced with the truth, she seemed unable to accept it. However, she quickly shifted her stance, suggesting that if she was adopted, she would still have inheritance rights. Aaron suddenly chimed in, supporting my sister's claim, yet our mother firmly denied any adoption, causing disbelief. "I'm the eldest daughter, and even Dad said so," my sister angrily declared, glaring at me. In response, I felt anger rising, retorting about her insatiable desire for more despite the money Dad had already given her. My brother-in-law chimed in, supporting her claim, saying it's natural to spend money on one's daughter. However, the lawyer intervened, bringing attention to questionable spending, including debt repayment. He suggested reviewing the will. My sister panicked, claiming ignorance about any will. It turned out that our father had wanted to discuss and decide the contents with the family, but she had skipped it for frivolous reasons. When the lawyer proposed reviewing the will, my sister and her husband reluctantly agreed. The will clearly stated the transfer of property to my mother and me, explaining why my sister was not adopted. Her mistreatment of me and reckless spending had disappointed our father. Realizing she had no right to the inheritance, my sister was visibly shocked. Her brother-in-law, who had initially supported her, suddenly changed his tune, accusing her of lying and leaving the room abruptly. In her anger, my sister blamed our mother for not asking to have her adopted, claiming it was unfair that only Mom received the inheritance. Frustrated, she cried and screamed, expressing her disappointment. Despite my sister's outrageous behavior, the lawyer remained calm, explaining that, being the biological son, I had the right to receive it all. Before things escalated further, He warned that the police might need to be involved if the situation continued. My sister appeared startled by the mention of the police, given her history of repeated theft. As my mother spoke tearfully to her, she clicked her tongue and left the room. Half a year passed, and the inheritance proceedings were completed without issue. Despite some grumbling from my sister and brother-in-law, they couldn't stand against the lawyer's efficiency. My mother gave my sister a small amount of money, but I had no intention of interfering. The frustrating part for our family was that the two had disappeared. Their blatant greed was so evident that even our relatives were lost for words. One day, my wife suggested that my mother-daughter and I go out to eat. Since my father's passing, our mother had been down, but she showed smiles when with her granddaughter. I suggested to my mother, "Why don't you live with us? You know, Brooke still comes home occasionally, but Sis only shows up to beg for money. How long does she plan to keep this up?" The reason my mom defends my sister is that she is her blood-related child. Also, there might be concern that if we visit our family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding that, I told her to take her time thinking about it and then drove my mom to our family home. Upon arrival, we encountered something unexpected. The lights were on in our supposedly empty home. It wasn't the time for the helper to come, so puzzled, I parked the car, suggesting, "Let's go up and have some coffee with Mother." We got out of the car and headed to the entrance, but the moment we approached the door, a car came rushing in. "Mom, watch out." I heard my daughter ahead of me. I shielded my wife with my body. The car just grazed me, and I managed to dodge it, but fell against a nearby flower bed, hurting myself badly. The car stopped after hitting the garage door. "Are you okay, Dad? Are you okay?" My wife and daughter rushed over, supporting me. Mother was trembling in shock at the sudden event. Understandably, from that moment on, a day of turmoil began. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and had to be hospitalized briefly. Later, I heard that Aaron Corner, my brother-in-law, was driving the car. According to the police, he explained that he mistook the accelerator for the brake. However, I had my doubts about that story. Amidst all of this, my sister and mother visited me in the hospital. Mother left briefly to arrange flowers, and during that time, my sister coldly looked at me and said, "You're only tough and bodied, huh?" with a slightly disappointed tone. I couldn't help but give her a smile. If I had died in the accident, Mom would inherit everything, right? Messed up your plan. I said this a bit sarcastically, and my sister looked uneasy. "You planned this, didn't you?" When I asked, my sister looked away, and I added, "But I won't be accepting Mom's share, so it won't work out for you." My sister looked surprised at this. She probably thought I would naturally accept it. I have a wife and kids, so I passed the inheritance to them. It's not strange for the head of the family to think that way. Even so, and besides, I've made a will early like Dad did. My sister was taken aback at this. "What? So that means—" "Yeah, unfortunately, my share of the inheritance won't go to Mom." My sister stared at me, then began to shake with anger. "There's $5 million, right? You could at least share a bit." When I immediately refused, my sister furiously grabbed my collar. "I'm your sister. We should split it." Whether it was the amount of the inheritance that drove her mad, she continued to scream in a very aggressive voice. I felt pity for my sister. It's that greedy attitude that disappointed Dad, don't you get it? My sister's face turned even redder, and she grabbed my neck. "Bro, stop it." Mother, who had just returned, scolded her loudly. Then, the nurses called by the nurses call button arrived and escorted my sister out of the room. Mother seemed to want to protect my sister, but my sister had lashed out at her too. As she left, she asked, "Why did she turn out like this?" Hearing Mother say this sadly, I felt a pain in my heart. Later, Mother's health deteriorated, and she fell off GR, gradually weakening. My wife, and I began visiting the family home more frequently to support my mother. But this seemed to upset my sister. Probably, she encountered my wife when coming to ask for money or heard about it from mother. One day, my sister called my cell phone. "From now on, we will take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come. Watch this," she declared all of a sudden. However, my sister wasn't listening and said, "We've already decided," before hanging up. My wife told me she had been turned away by my sister. Too concerned about how my sister, who had no experience in household chores or living, would manage, I quickly contacted mother. To my surprise, I found out that my brother-in-law had experience in caregiving. Mother was still independent, not yet in a worrying state. This reassured me. However, within just a month, mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was said to be due to a medication dosage error. When we rushed to the hospital, mother was shockingly weak. The doctors also seemed puzzled by her condition. "I don't think such a mistake has ever happened before," one of them remarked. I left my wife to look after mother and went to our family home, which was in a terrible state. Despite my mother's love for cooking, the fridge, usually full of fresh ingredients, was empty. Shockingly, even the helper had been quickly dismissed. Feeling ashamed of trusting my sister even a little, anger surged within me. Checking the safe where valuables were kept, I found that a large amount of money was missing from mother's passbook. The passbook with the inheritance was safe in a bank locker, but there was hardly any of the money meant for living expenses left. I returned to my mother, explained the situation, and revealed my sister's betrayal. Brooke did such a thing. Mother seemed unaware of the passbook issue and showed a shocked expression. But when asked about the medication error, she explained that my brother-in-law had prepared it and looked troubled. "Mom, I don't think you should let them into that house. They claimed they would take care of you, but the state of that house was the worst, and you've gotten so frail. Haven't they been feeding you properly?" Speaking with concern, G hung her head. "Mom, let's live together. I'll build a new house, and we can live there together." Moved by my suggestion, mother shed tears. However, her condition continued to worsen. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they, along with my sister, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Ultimately, mother passed away without recovering. When I went to the family home for the funeral, all the valuable items had disappeared. It seemed that my sister and brother-in-law, in need of money, had taken them. Standing in a desolate place, I was overcome with anger. I had to find a way to make my sister take responsibility for mother's sake and as atonement for what she had done. I resolved to do something. The day after mother's funeral, my sister and I met at the lawyer's office to discuss the inheritance. "Condolences, but as her daughter, I'm entitled to mother's inheritance." My sister said this with a sense of superiority, which made me laugh involuntarily. She seemed to be under some misconception. "Let's open the will then." As the lawyer revealed the contents of the will, my sister turned pale. "You're joking. Why?" "Bro, you are not entitled to any of the inheritance." This is in accordance with Dad's wishes. My brother-in-law started to get angry, but the lawyer had nothing else to say except to repeat the same thing. "This must be a mistake. Bro is her child, isn't she?" My brother-in-law suddenly became furious, throwing things off the table. "Are you trying to trick us? We won't let you get away with this. Give us the inheritance now." "Aaron, you planned to kill mother, didn't you?" When I asked, my brother-in-law glared at me unpleasantly. "Oh, I wouldn't do such a thing." "Then why did the medication error occur?" My brother-in-law appeared annoyed. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the rift between my sister and me widened, and the family bonds that were already strained became nearly non-existent. Despite her attempts to seek support from relatives, my sister faced a cold shoulder, and her financial struggles continued. Meanwhile, I focused on building a stable and fulfilling life for my own family, working diligently and finding solace in providing for my wife and children without relying on the tumultuous inheritance battles that had plagued us. Over time, the stock dividends became not just a financial benefit, but a symbol of my commitment to a more secure and principled life. My sister's situation didn't improve. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her both financially and emotionally. It became a stark reminder of the importance of responsible choices and the lasting impact they can have on one's life. As the years passed, I held no ill will towards my sister, recognizing that everyone faces their own battles and makes their own choices. Still, the events that unfolded served as a powerful lesson of the significance of integrity, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of one's actions. In the midst of the turmoil, I found strength in forging ahead with resilience, determined to create a future that wasn't tainted by past misfortunes. The dividends, once a mere financial gain, evolved into a testament to the enduring power of personal growth and the ability to rise above adversity. Life moved forward, and I embraced the opportunities to thrive, leaving behind the shadows of familial discord. The lessons learned from this chapter of my life became an integral part of shaping my values and decisions, ensuring a legacy built on principles rather than the pursuit of material gain. In the end, it was not the inheritance that defined my journey, but the choices made along the way. Choices that led to a life grounded in authenticity, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future for those I cared about the most.